Welcome to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, DJ Marcotte and John Soroyce. Enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Working Class Podcast, the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. We are the Blue Collar Ballers, DJ, and I have a special guest today. You can check us out on our Facebook page at Armchair Fantasy Football, on Twitter at Armchair FF Pod. I'm on Twitter at Armchair Kingpin. John, who is not here today, is on Twitter at John2977. And of course, you can email us at armchairfb@gmail.com. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Podbean. And you can find our videos on YouTube. Just search Armchair Fantasy Football. I have a very special guest today. Actually, I have my son Andrew in the room, who is paying attention to his phone and listening to God knows what. But I have an even more special guest today. Not that Andrew's not very special. The godfather of our fantasy leagues that John and I are in. At least that's what I consider him. And the Brett Favre of fantasy football is retired and unretired on a couple of occasions. And he's really old. The Yoda of fantasy football, the Armchair Yoda. And our great friend Tom Martell joins us today. Tom, you actually got me started into fantasy football, and as you said, you need to apologize to my wife at some point for that. It was several years ago. You whipped my butt with LaDainian Tomlinson, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was 2008.
2008. That's where it all started for this guy, and it was all thanks to Tom and his guidance. But you've been around the block a while in fantasy football. How did it start for you? What year did it start for you? Because it was a lot prior to myself, I'm guessing.
Roughly 1991.
91. You weren't even born, Andrew. Not even close. So 1991. How'd you guys do it back in the day?
The guy that ran the league used to go in the newspapers every night, get all the stats, and figure out the point systems that way.
So it was basically handwritten.
It was handwritten.
That's
all the
crazy.
drafts were live, and you had to write everything down by hand.
And was it just touchdowns that were important, or was it kind of yards as well, or 100-yard games, stuff
100-yard games just to get bonus points for running backs and receivers, 300-yard games for quarterbacks. But the longer your touchdown, more points you got. So a 75-yard touchdown was worth more than a 30-yard touchdown.
Which makes a lot of sense. So the way it started back in the day, it's kind of, flowing back into that mindset, and that's the way they set up points. A lot of fantasy leagues are doing that now, where it's all bonus points. I'm more meat and potatoes, kind of. But yeah, it's funny how it started, and then for years it was just either standard or PPR, and standard isn't even standard anymore. I mean, not many people do standard these days. It's all PPR, which is what our rankings are based off. Which we are going to go through wide receivers today. The top 20 this week, 20 through 11, I should say, today, you and I, Tom, so this is going to be pretty exciting. Once again, whenever I do these breakdowns for rankings and end-of-season rankings, it's always a surprise who lands on there, who doesn't. You've got a Cortland Sutton in there, but you don't have a Odell Beckham. Always kind of eye-opening stuff when I pour through all of these stats, but it's pretty fun, and I enjoy doing it. Before we do that, Tom, I don't know if you know this or not, but we were in the top 50 at one point. Well, 53 for fantasy sports podcasts on Apple Podcasts. We are not there anymore. We are outside of the top 100, and we want to get back into the top 100. So what we need, Tom, yourself, all of our armchair army, so to speak, we need you guys to help us out by sharing our content, advocating for us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the good social network sites. And if you do that, we can hook you up with some free swag via a t-shirt, which I'm wearing today, but we're not doing video today, so it's not very helpful. But if we can break back into the top 100, one listener will get a free Armchair Fantasy Football t-shirt. All you have to do is leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe, or like one of our videos and leave a comment on YouTube. As we hit bigger milestones, like maybe the top 25, or a number of downloads or something along those lines, we'll give out bigger prizes. So if you want to get some free swag and help us out, let's do it. All Speaking of let's do it, let's get into the top 20. Starting at number 20, John Brown. from the recently departed Buffalo Bills. Great game in the first round, but unfortunately John Brown's not around to see the second round, and neither is his former team, the Ravens, who just lost last night. But John Brown kind of surprised me a little bit, Tom. 72 receptions, 100 on 115 targets, 1,050 yards, and 6 touchdowns on the season. So a pretty good stat line there. Surprisingly for me, only 2 games this season, Tom, with sorry if I'm going to say John a million times because that's who I'm used to having next to me. But only 2 games with single-digit PPR points, Tom, all season, but also only 2 games over 20. So he didn't win you any weeks, but he didn't lose you any weeks.
Those are the guys you usually want on your team.
Yeah, those are definitely the guys you want in that wide receiver two, that flex spot. But so far so good. 7th among wide receivers in air yards, which is excellent because that means he's getting the ball down the field. Air yards is a stat really about vertical yards on a pass attempt at the moment the ball is caught. So it's from the quarterback to the receiver, the average of deep balls basically going to him, which we've all known John Brown, that's a big part of his game. I didn't really think it happened a lot this year, but apparently it did based on the stats. So what is his value to you, Tom, do you think, as a fantasy owner?
Just as a wide receiver, too, not much more. He's going to get that 75-yard touchdown and like 1 or 2 other receptions a game, not too much after that.
Yeah, in another cool stat for him, dude, is ranked 7th in weighted opportunity ranking. I like to call it WOPR. WPR is a weighted combination of targets a player receives and the share of the team air yard targets. So it's his targets plus his air yard targets. So John Brown basically is a big part of that offense. And it's not surprising given the fact that if I think back at it, it's really the Cole Beasley, John Brown show in terms of receivers. And even if you throw tight end in there, Dawson Knox isn't a big part of the game plan. Devin Singletary catches some passes.
At the end of the year, he came on strong.
He did, yeah. Devin Singletary definitely carved out a spot, in the receiving game there. I love Devin Singletary, by the way. That guy's definitely going to be on a sleeper list somewhere in the offseason. The biggest issue for me with John Brown, he wasn't great in yards after the catch. He didn't even crack the top 50 there. And he's got a 62.6 catch percentage, Tom, which isn't that great. He gives you safe wide receiver 2 numbers, but even with the downfield targets, he doesn't catch enough of his targets to give you that safe ceiling, I guess, so to speak. So I like John Brown. He's fine, but can he even repeat that next year? That's my concern with him.
I think he can, just because Josh Allen loves him. He likes to throw the ball deep.
He's got the chemistry, yeah, definitely. I could see that happening, but I don't know if I'd want to bank on it. I don't know if I'm putting my money down on that guy. But I do like John Brown, and I'm glad to finally see it because how many years have we been saying, John Brown, he's got all this talent, whether it be in Arizona, in Baltimore, and now in Buffalo, he's finally showing it. And like you said, Allen definitely has some chemistry with him. Moving on to number 19, I'm shocked that this guy is in the top 20. I shouldn't be, but I am. It's Courtland Sutton, 72 reception on 124 targets, which is actually a really good target count for a guy that's that young. 1,112 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was 6th in the league in target share, Tom, with about a quarter of the team's targets went to Courtland Sutton. That's a huge number. Top 15 in yards per catch with 15.4 yards per catch. 5 weeks with single-digit performance and not 1 over 20, so he wasn't providing you a lot of week-winning output, but he was giving you what you need. Again, another one of those guys that's a safe guy.
He went through 3 different quarterbacks last year.
That's another thing. Yeah, he did not have great quarterback play this year, and he kind of reminded me of Demaryius Thomas in the Tebow year, where he just produced despite it, but it capped his ceiling. Is that what you're suggesting? Is that maybe the quarterback play?
I think next year, being year 3 with Drew Lock with him, he could be a top 10 receiver.
Are you a believer in Drew Lock?
For their system, yes. He's got 2 good running backs.
Yep, he definitely does. Yeah, no, I like Sutton a lot, man. And like I said, he's one of those safe guys. And I agree with you. If Lock can develop further, let's not forget, that kid was a rookie that didn't even play until late in the season.
5 weeks it was.
Right. So his learning curve was pretty fast. And they obviously went and got him in the draft because they wanted him. And he was a guy that they were locked in on. I think that the upside for Cortland Sutton next year could be a wide receiver 1, but I'm a little concerned. I need to see Drew Lock progress more to buy into him as that, but I definitely think you can probably bank on him as a wide receiver 2 next year.
Oh, definitely. He reminds me of Brandon Marshall back in the day.
Yeah. Not the linebacker, the receiver.
The wide receiver.
Will he be on as many teams, you think, as Brandon Marshall?
Let's hope not.
All right, moving on to the next guy at number 18. I love this guy. He is very underrated. I've been trying to trade him in our keeper league, and nobody wants to even sniff him at even like a 10th or 11th round pick. From Andrew's favorite team, Tyler Boyd. I'm a big Tyler Boyd guy, and as much as I'd love to have him next year, I've got guys that are well ahead of him in the pecking order on my keeper league team. But this kid, you want to talk about bad quarterback play? First of all, you got Andy Dalton, who's in fantasy, he's fine. He's okay. He's
a quarterback.
He's a bye-week fill-in, yeah. In reality, he's not that good. And then you had Ryan Finley. He doesn't like to fight, unfortunately. Not like his namesake. He was even worse than Dalton. Sorry, I almost went Carson Palmer there, but I guess I was going a little bit too far back. I always mistake those guys, Carson Palmer and Andy Dalton. And that's so disrespectful to Carson Palmer because he was better than that clown. I mean, come on. Anyway, moving on to Tyler Boyd. 90 receptions on 148 targets, Tom. That was a number that surprised me. John Ross was out, though. Auden Tate did a fine job, but he wasn't a stud, and Tyler Eifert's not the guy he...
And A.J. Green wasn't even on the field all year.
He didn't play, no. So I guess it shouldn't surprise me, but that target number did surprise me, nearly 150. He had 1,046 yards, 5 touchdowns, 7th in the league in yards after the catch, which also surprised me. He had 5 games with single-digit PPR points, but 3 of them over 20. So similar to John Brown, Tom, lots of solid wide receiver 2 or flex games, but nothing that's really going to blow you away. And I think that's probably why people don't think of him as a top talent.
Everything's thrown 5 yards to him. He has to get to 15 afterwards on his own.
Yes, I have ranted in previous episodes on quarterback play this year and how awful it was. But yeah, Mr. Finley's an example of that. But despite all of that, Tyler Boyd still had a good year. He did suffer through the Ryan Finley experiment, as I like to call it. But so if you actually compare his numbers with Finley to his numbers with Dalton, he averaged 11.1 PPR points per game with Finley and 14.8 PPR points per game with Dalton. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but 3 points a week is actually a significant amount when you're comparing quarterbacks. Does he get an upgrade, Tom? And I've been really wanting to see because we haven't discussed this. Does he get a significant upgrade with the presumed 2020 starter, Joe Burrow?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? You're not a big Burrow
guy? Depends if AJ
guy?
comes in. That's the key.
Well, he did average more points with A.J. Green last year, too. When A.J. was on the field, he actually averaged about 3 more with A.J. than he did without him. John's a big Joe Burrow guy. Have you followed much of him in college?
I have.
And what are your thoughts on him?
Unbelievable. He's real accurate. He can scramble in the pocket.
So you think it would be an upgrade for him?
If he goes on the field right away. To keep Dalton, keep him on the bench, let him learn.
I think Dalton's a free agent, but don't quote me on that.
I heard New England.
I've heard New England, too. We can get into the New England thing. Tom's actually a Giants fan, and I'm a Cowboys fan, and I think we both hate New England more than we do our opposite teams, which are rivals, and that's funny. But, yeah, no, I've heard that, too, that Dalton could be like a gap bridger, so to speak. I think they're getting Trevor Lawrence next year. At least they're making a big push for him, but we'll see how that goes. But Tyler Boyd, I think Joe Burrow is going to be the guy from day one. I think it's going to be a significant improvement. But you never know. You never know with these rookie quarterbacks, especially the ones that are drafted number 1 overall. They bust more than they boom, honestly, when you look at it. But yeah, Tyler Boyd. I love the guy. Next year, I don't see him as a wide receiver 1. I see him right in the same category. But I think he inches closer to that wide receiver 1 area. Excuse me. Number 17, DJ Chark. 73 receptions, 118 targets, 1,008 yards, and 8 touchdowns. In his second season out of the wide receiver factory lately, known as LSU, struggled with consistency with single-digit PPR points in just 6 games, which is a lot. If you're getting single digits in PPR in 6 games, That's more than you want. You don't really want more than 3 or 4. So that's a little bit more, too close for comfort there. And just 3 games over 20 PPR points. However, Tom, 2 of those were over 30. So he does have high upside. Cool stat on him, he dropped 0 passes this year. Not 1 pass dropped. He came out of nowhere with an ADP of 316, so basically undrafted. But he didn't stand out in any particular category when I broke down his stats. So is this his ceiling, do you think?
I think it is. I think he's a boom or bust player. They run the ball more than they pass with the 2 quarterbacks with Foles and Minshew in there.
Coaching staff's not changing. Doug Moron's sticking around, so that strategy probably isn't going to change. Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is his ceiling. But again, if your ceiling is the 17th ranked
but I think he digresses, though.
You think so?
I don't think he's this good.
Yeah, and he like we said, he came out of nowhere. And a lot of times when guys come out of nowhere, they go back into nowhere. That definitely could happen.
Year in and year out, those type of guys are always out there.
It's true. Do you think so? Didi, I would say, is probably a more talented guy.
They said Chalk's more talented, but talent doesn't always get you the ball.
See, that's true, number one. And number two, when I think of talent, I think of all-around talent and being multi-dimensional. And DJ Chark is more multi-dimensional than I thought he was, especially with the 0 drop passes. That's awesome. And what happens when you don't drop passes? They're going to throw to you more. That's just how it's going to go. So DJ Chark's a nice, fun story, but I think this is his ceiling. You think it might be a little bit lower, his ceiling next year. And we'll see how that all plays out. The next guy, I think we both agree that this dude's ceiling has not been met yet, and this is DJ Moore at number 16, 87 receptions, 135 targets, 1,175 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Touchdown count, not good.
No.
That's a concern. But we also have to consider that his quarterback play, once again, this is going to be a theme here, was not good.
Another 3-headed monster down there in Carolina.
Exactly. None of them were any good. And obviously, Cam's talented, but did he even last a game?
Not even 1 or 2.
Exactly. So, no Cam. Allen is trash. And the thing with Allen is, like, he would have games where it's a sweet matchup, and he would play horribly. Well, what are you doing as a fantasy owner? You're playing the guys when they have a sweet matchup. And he would always underperform. And then he would have a tough matchup and have a great game.
Ryan Fitzpatrick of the world.
Exactly. You never knew what to do with Allen, but you knew what to do with Moore. You started him every single week. DJ Moore, 10th in the league in contested catch rate. So that's a 50-50 ball stat. And John and I talk about the 50-50 ball a lot. N'Keal Harry is another one of those 50-50 ball guys. And that's a more important stat than people realize. That means I'm going to get the ball no matter what. And if I don't, you had to really fight me for it. And DJ Moore is one of those guys. He was 8th in the league in target share, 10th in the league in targets. Again, we talked about the poor quarterback play from Kyle Allen. I think that left a lot on the table in terms of fantasy points for DJ Moore. But even with that being said, he was really consistent, Tom. He only had 2 games with single-digit PPR points. I see a gigantic third-year leap, especially if there's an upgraded quarterback. You would think that there's going to be. I'm going to tell you right now, this guy, DJ Moore, is tailor-made, given his prowess, his versatility, and the other guy's age, for Tom Brady. And if Tom Brady were to end up in Carolina, that would, I think, be a huge boost for DJ Moore.
Oh, I agree, but I don't think that will ever happen.
You don't think so? You think Brady's staying?
He's either staying or going out west. He's going to go where it's sunny.
I've hitched my wagon to Las Vegas. And I may be wrong, and I know that's kind of I don't know what the Vegas odds are on it. Probably not as good as some of the other teams, but if he were to go to Carolina, DJ Moore is a bigger star than he is. And I think DJ Moore's a superstar in this league. In the making.
Yes. Yep. So he's only 2 years, so.
Yep. But he's got a lot of talent. And he's competing with, unfortunately, Christian McCaffrey for targets. And one would think if you're competing with your running back, that's not a big deal. But when your running back is Christian McCaffrey, the reincarnated LaDainian Tomlinson, it becomes a problem. But I love DJ Moore.
I do too.
Sky's the limit on this kid. Next guy on the list, Mike Evans at number 15. And I will say this was mostly due to injury. He did miss a number of games, but the games he did play, he had 67 receptions, 118 targets, 1,157 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He did, as we said, just play 13 games. So his 16-game pace, Tom, was 82 receptions, 1424 for yards, and 10 touchdowns. That's a top 5 stat line right there. And I don't think that was unachievable for him if he had played the whole season.
Well, he played the Giants every game. He'd have like 4,000 yards. He blew up against them.
I can tell you're passionate about that. Well, Mike Evans, he good. You know, that's part of the deal. So in the Giants, I don't know how to tell you this, and from a Cowboys fan, I got nothing to talk about here, but the Giants aren't very good. And they're just waiting to, I don't know what they're waiting to do, but they got a new coach now. What do you think of that?
I actually like it. A new
Yeah.
judge in town.
Yeah, it's funny because you had told me that Mike McCarthy was high on your list. And he was on my list. And the more that I thought about it, the more I liked it. You know, who on the open market was a better grab than Mike McCarthy at this point? The guy has had success. He's won a Super Bowl. And then you guys got Joe Bell, who was it they picked?
Joe Judge.
Joe Judge. I think it was the water boy for the New England Patriots. But it's an automatic upgrade off the previous 2 coaches that you guys have
definitely.
had. And they picked up an offensive coordinator too, didn't they?
Yes, some Garrett.
Did they sign him?
Jason Garrett's the new offensive coordinator.
Ooh, okay. Well, you know, it was
That's where
exciting.
he belongs.
It was exciting for a little while there. But back to Mike Evans. We don't want to get on a rant on the Giants and the Cowboys. We could go all day long on that. Not very consistent. He had 5 games with single-digit PPR points, and one of them, Tom, was the dreaded goose egg. He gave you
That's the
0.
game he got hurt, didn't he?
He had 7 targets on that game, and he didn't do anything with those. So when I look at the stats, I look at if there's any signs of life, and there was some signs of life there. But I think it was the game that he got hurt nonetheless. Surprisingly, only 3 games over 20. 2 of them were over 30, and one of them was over 40, but I was a little surprised to see that he didn't have more boom games. How big of a factor do you think Chris Godwin is?
I think that's a lot. Winston liked him down the stretch, and
Yeah,
he emerged down there.
They definitely have a lot of compatibility. I would argue more so than Evans and Winston. I think Godwin runs a lot of safer routes. I think that's a big part of it. But Evans still had a great year nonetheless. He was number 2 in the league in air yards also, which is a big stat for me. That means when Jameis was chucking it to him, it was deep. And that's important. So, yeah, Mike Evans had a good year. And if he was healthy all 16 games, it would have been even better. So it's surprising to see him at 15, but given the circumstances, he had a great year. What do you think his outlook is for next year? Do you think Jameis stays? Do you think he improves on these numbers? Do you think he's starting to age? Like, what's your take on it?
I think him and Godwin's numbers are going to flip-flop, basically. Just because.
Like from week to week?
Week to week.
Yeah. What about Jameis? You think he's staying?
What's their other options?
That's a great question, yeah. And I think that's probably... I think that's why he's going to stay. I think Arians sees something in him. The guy threw over 30 touchdowns.
5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns.
Exactly. He threw 30-plus picks, too. So, but I think if I look at Arians, he's asking the same question that you asked. Unless I'm getting Tom Brady. And I'm not even so sure at this stage of his career Tom Brady's better. I know I'll get a lot of heck for that. But from what I've seen from Brady the last couple of years, especially at the end of the season, it's not been pretty.
No, not at all.
So if you're Arians and you look at it, well, this kid threw 30-plus touchdowns. He got 5,000 yards. I just need to make sure he doesn't throw those picks again. And I can even live with 20 picks probably. The problem is, can you teach Jameis not to throw interceptions?
That's the key to the whole thing.
He seems to really like to throw to the other team.
He's a gunslinger, the Brett Favre types of the world. They just like to throw.
But he doesn't seem to have the football IQ of a Brett Favre. And even that was overrated. But it's just, for me, these guys, for me, I don't care. I want the fantasy points. But Bruce Arians wants the championships. He wants the title wins. He wants, the playoff appearances. Can he get that with Jameis Winston in a really tough division? I don't know. I don't think he can.
They're the 4th best team in that division, so that doesn't help them.
And Jameis, to me, is a guy that he's got the Romo gene. When it matters the most, he's going to throw the ball to the other team. And to me, I don't know. Arians, does he want that? Does he not? I don't think there's much better out there on the open market. But we didn't think Ryan Tannehill was anything either. We thought he was dead.
Though.
But he's still there.
70 yards, 2 games in a row. But
he did have a good season fantasy-wise, and had he played 16 games, he probably would have cracked into the top 10. So anyway, I think they're going to probably look at the draft too. Is there a guy that might fall? Could a Tua fall to them? I'd be surprised if Winston is there next year, but I could be wrong, and you're probably right, because I go more gut-based, and you're probably more analyzing the situation from a Bruce Arians standpoint. But either way, I think Mike Evans will be fine. But he's getting older, and
he's 27.
He's right. Yeah, he's right in that frame. So you probably get a few more years out of him, but that's about it. And Chris Godwin, does he continue to take over that role? It's going to be interesting to see. But both those guys are fun to watch. Like you said, Jameis is that YOLO mentality. You only live once, and he just doesn't care. But that provides really fun fantasy football stats, and it's really fun to watch, especially with Evans and Godwin out there, if they can both stay healthy. Number 14, this guy was so much higher on the list than I ever thought he would be. It felt like he had a bad year, but he really didn't, and that's Robert Woods from the Rams, 90 receptions. So anytime you get 90 plus is excellent. 139 on 139 targets, 1,134 yards, and only 2 touchdowns. So that was the problem with Robert Woods this year. But if you look at his career, he reached a career high in receptions and targets. But his touchdown count, like we just said, is really what damaged his fantasy output. He was 13th in the league in target share, despite competing with Gurley, Higbee, Cooks, and Kupp. So to be 13th in target share is really good. But to do it with those guys vulturing for all the other targets is excellent. Like that really surprised. That was a stat that really surprised me. Only 1 drop on the season. So when you package all that together, that means to me that he's probably, in Jared Goff's mind, his most reliable and trusted target.
Between him and Cooper Kupp.
Right. And Kupp kind of fluctuated there. Like, he had issues when there was blocking to be done. He wasn't even on the field. So that limited his snap percentage. But yeah, Woods and Kupp are the guys that, if you took them out of the equation, Goff would probably not even... He'd be Goffle again, yeah, which he kind of was a few times this year. Problem with Woods, he was kind of inconsistent. Again, I look at the consistency. I look at the games over 20. I look at the games under 10. And he was kind of all over the map there. He had 6 games in single-digit PPR points. But he did have 5 over 20. So in terms of his floor, it's not where you wanted it to be. But when he's giving you 5 games over 20 points, that's really,
with 2
really
touchdowns
good.
On the table.
With only 2 touchdowns. That's a great point. That means that he's got such a target share that he's always going to give you production. I just don't like to cross my fingers on, is this going to be one of those single-digit games? But you're dealing with that with most wide receivers.
Except for the top 5, roughly.
Right, except for Michael Thomas. Yeah. But even like Hopkins, Hop will give you some bad games, you know what I mean? So Robert Woods, as steady as they go, it was a sneaky good season for him. This seems to me, Tom, knowing you, one of those guys you would love to always have on your roster.
We had him on our fantasy team last year.
Yeah, just that steady Eddie guy. Number 13, moving on, Tyler Lockett, 82 receptions, 110 targets, and 1,057 yards and 8 touchdowns, a great touchdown count there. The perception of this guy, Tom, is that he's boom or bust, but he actually finished 9th in consistency. He had 5 single-digit PPR games, which you're going to note, that's a theme. Most guys on this list are right around 5, but you probably hung up on the goose egg that he gave you against Minnesota, which was a legit goose egg.
Another injury, though.
But he played a good portion of that game. That was a legit
basically
goose
a decoy,
egg.
though, out there.
He was, yeah. He was coming off an injury. But you started him in all likelihood because Minnesota didn't have a great secondary, and he definitely, I would say, give you a bad taste in your mouth on that. But he did give you week-winning performances with 32.4, 40.2, and 26 PPR points a week, 3, 9, and 15. Those are huge numbers right there. If you're getting over 40, that dude probably just won you your week, in all likelihood. He's never going to go without any bust games. That's my thing with Lockett. And he doesn't really have any measurables or metrics that jump off the page at you, but you don't need that, as we've said. You don't need that in every player that you have. And you know what you're getting out of Tyler Lockett, a solid wide receiver 2, good flex option because he does have that 40-point upside. Tyler Lockett keeps creeping up this list every year, Tom. Do you think he continues to progress?
I think he's staying right here with the emergence of Metcalf.
Yeah,
Metcalf's a beast.
He is. I'm looking at Metcalf this year, and I'm like, this guy is a raw rookie that didn't even know all the routes week 1, and he probably still doesn't. I mean, that guy's upside is ridiculous. But yeah, I think Tyler Lockett, the way I look at this guy is he's got that chemistry and that trust with Russell Wilson.
Russell loves him as down the field.
Absolutely. And he's a good slot receiver too. And you can be as talented as you want, but if you don't have, look at Tom Brady. So look at N'Keal Harry and Tom Brady. N'Keal Harry is uber talented, got all the talent in the world, but Brady doesn't trust him. And then you look at Carson Wentz, who was the kid that they had some fourth string wide receiver whose name is sadly escaping me right now.
Brown or Whiteside?
No, it wasn't Whiteside. It was some dude, and he had like a 3-game stretch with Wentz that was really, really good. It's because Wentz trusted him. And trust from your quarterback to your receiver is so important that people don't even realize that. And Tyler Lockett definitely has that. I don't know why that guy's name is escaping me, but you'll probably never hear from him again. Oh, your boy! Your boy is next. Jarvis Landry. How many years in a row did you have Jarvis Landry, dude?
At least 4.
No, I guess so, because his career only spans back. Yeah, Jarvis Landry, Tom's BFF, his best fantasy for life. Jarvis Landry once again did this year what Jarvis Landry does. 83 receptions, 138 targets, 1,174 yards, and 6 touchdowns. This is what he does every year. This is actually on the lower end because he's been 100-plus receptions before. But, I mean, he's fairly consistent with only 4 single-digit PPR points, game points on the season. He had 3 games over 30, though, Tom, which really blew me away.
Those are the boomer bust guys.
But I never looked at him as a boomer bust guy. I always looked at him as he's going to give me 12 to 15 every week. But he definitely had a very high ceiling this year. The funny thing about him is I said in the offseason that not only did I think that Landry would maintain his production even with Odell on the field, that I also felt Odell would actually be a benefit to Landry drawing coverage. And I remember Jake laughed at me and said that Landry was basically done. Well, that's not what happened. And it, almost to a T, what I said would happen. Let's note that Odell didn't make the top 20, despite playing all 16 games, Tom. And you're a Giants fan. You know a lot about Odell. He also had 9 less receptions on the season than Landry, 5 less targets than Landry, and even 2 less touchdowns than Landry. So not only did Odell not affect Landry, Landry just like brushed his shoulder off and said, nah, kid, this is still my team in Cleveland here. Big thing for me, is it still his team next year?
I believe it is. Beckham's the name. He might be gone.
You think so?
You hear rumors he's leaving.
That he's not happy. So if you look at let's say Josh McDaniels gets the job, because as of this recording it has not been announced, and it doesn't sound like Cleveland's going to rush on their decision, and they shouldn't. I don't think
there's no one to compete with. Why would they?
There's no reason to. So if Josh McDaniels goes in there, does he elevate Baker Mayfield to the point where Odell is the same old Odell?
It's up to Baker. Yeah. If he wants to learn a new system, McDaniel's system's complicated.
It is, if he brings the Patriot system with him, for sure. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think Odell stays there. He's under contract, first of all. Unless somebody rolls out a first-round pick for him, I don't think he's going anywhere. But I think Landry, even with Odell, to bring the point back around, Landry's fine. Landry's going to be the Landry that he is every year. And he's given us no reason to not think that.
Exactly. 85 receptions, 1,000 yards every year.
Guaranteed. A little bit more on Jarvis. He has been the wide receiver 2 every season without fail. So he's been in that category every season without fail. So you know he's going to rank in that area, which is pretty impressive because when he went to Cleveland, a lot of people had wrote him off and thought that his production was based on his time in Miami. But again, another guy that nothing jumps off the page at you. He doesn't have the press clippings, but he brings his lunch pail work output to your fantasy box score week in and week out. He's one of those lunch pail guys, and that's why I like Landry a lot. Not as much as you. I could never get him because you always drafted him ahead of me, but hey, be that as it may. All right, talking about Miami a little bit with Jarvis Landry, we're going to move on to number 11 and the last guy for today. I love this story about Devontae Parker, Tom. I just love this story Because you want to talk about a guy that was written off for dead, including by myself. So I'm not going to sit here and go telling on the mountain that I was repping Devontae Parker coming into the season. Because I wasn't, and neither was anybody else on the planet. But he gave you 72 receptions on 128 targets. I actually thought his target count would have been higher than that. He had 1,202 yards and 9 touchdowns. He ranked 3rd in the league in touchdowns. I got a little quiz for you. What do these wide receiver names have in common? I got a long list here. Traquan Smith, Danny Amendola, Marquise Goodwin, Paris Campbell, Albert Wilson, Nelson Aguilar, Paul Richardson, Taylor Gabriel, Paris Campbell, Devin Funchess, Demaryius Thomas, Ted Ginn, and Randall Cobb. What do they all have in common?
All drafted last year ahead of him in fantasy.
They were all drafted ahead of Devontae Parker last year. What? Like, who would have expected this? I mean, and you can't blame people. He was actually, I think his ADP was 232. You got him for nothing. You got him off. I got him off the waiver wire in my Dynasty League. So fun story about Parker. I got him off the waiver wire in Dynasty. John actually cut him. And I'm like, I'll pick him up. I mean, who else are they going to throw to in Miami? I never started him, despite how good his year was. I started him once in the championship, and that was only because Chris Godwin was out. And he dominated guess who in the championship? John Soroyce, the guy that cut him. So that was a fun little story, too. All kinds of feel-good stories about Devontae Parker. He ranked 9th in yards per catch, 16.7 yards per catch. So every time the ball went to him and he caught it, he got you 16 yards. Think about that. That's incredible.
That's Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, well, that is Ryan Fitzpatrick, too. Do you love or hate Ryan Fitzpatrick?
I don't like him at all.
You don't like him?
No.
Everybody likes Ryan
I
Fitzpatrick,
like him as a
man.
He's fun, but if I had to have him on my team, no way.
No. Is he better than Daniel Jones?
No.
We'll talk about Daniel Jones in a different episode when you come back, but maybe we'll talk about his outlook for next year. Maybe we'll do it today. But anyway, back to Devontae Parker. Super consistent. Only 3 single-digit PPR games and 5 games with 20 or more. Only six games with less than 11 PPR points. I mean, that's incredible. Those are numbers of a guy that you would draft in the second round at latest. And he's giving it to you with the 232nd player off the board. Awesome story here with Devontae Parker. But we've seen the big picture from him, and the big picture is not good. The big picture is ugly.
4 years of nothing.
Nothing. So, is this, we kind of talked about Chark, is this a flash in the pan? Or do they finally realize, giving him an extension, finally realize what they have in Devontae Parker?
I think the ceiling is met. I think the numbers go down next year.
But that's a good ceiling. Like, I'd be happy with that ceiling. What's his floor? Is his floor Corey Davis?
No, I think 60 receptions, 800 yards, 5 touchdowns.
And I'm happy with that floor. So, if you were in the 5th round next year, you'd consider taking Devontae.
5th round, yes, but
not
11th overall. That's 2nd or 3rd round right there.
Right, yeah. I agree with you. I'm with you on that one. All right, so that's the top 11, man. Breeze through that pretty quick. Let's talk about Dr. Jones. What's he going to do, man?
If he can keep those fumbles.
I know. He turns the ball over a lot. So were you happy with his rookie season?
For the most part,
Yeah.
except for the fumbles.
Yeah, you cannot do that in the NFL. It's going to be interesting how things go. I mean, I'm very happy with the addition of Mike McCarthy, but we don't have a quarterback right now. He's not under contract, and we don't have a wide receiver 1 under contract either. So hopefully Dallas
I think
can get...
Michael Gallup could be your number 1. I like him.
John says the same thing, but I don't... I've seen Michael Gallup as the number 1, and it's about as pretty as the first 3 seasons of Devontae Parker. It ain't good. But he was also a rookie. He was really thrust into the role.
Well, this year, too, for him.
This is, yeah. But last year when he, before Cooper was traded to Dallas, he was not good. And he was their quote-unquote number 1. But again, it was his first 5 games of his career, coming out as a good prospect, but not a top prospect. I do like Michael Gallup a lot. But like I told John, I'm like, so let's say you slide Michael Gallup into that wide receiver 1 role. Well, who's the new Michael? If he's the new Cooper, I'm fine with that. But who's the new Michael Gallup? And I don't know that they have that. But Jerry's pretty good at drafting players. As far as New York, I have heard a rumor that Odell might end up.
I've
back
heard
in New
that
York.
too. I don't want him back.
You don't
at
want
all.
him?
No, we don't need him.
I don't think any team needs an Odell Beckham. I think
Teams could. New England, he could flourish up there.
maybe, but I remember T.O. and T.O. was a great player. Talent-wise, maybe he's definitely top 3 talent-wise at receiver, but he was poison. And Odell, I look at as a similar poison. Just he's always going to eat that team from the inside out. And I agree with you. I wouldn't want to see him in Dallas.
No, I don't
Absolutely
want him back
not.
at all. We have enough wide receivers. If he can play cornerback, I'll take him back.
Yeah. That's why I don't think the market's that big for Odell this year. Honestly, people are saying, "Oh, he'll get traded." I don't know that he's got a big market. What did he do for Cleveland this year? Nothing. He didn't even make the top 20. So I guess I'll ask you that before we get out of Dodge here. Your former New York Giant, current Cleveland Brown, does he work his way back into the top 20 next year?
I think so. He's
I think
talented.
so too. Yeah, I actually traded to get him just to get rid of him. I don't even remember what I traded Mark Andrews basically for Odell, and then I flipped Odell to get some picks. So I had Odell for a hot minute, but I just don't trust the guy. And even when he's out there, he's the epitome of boomer bust as well. So that does it for today, Tom. Your maiden voyage. When you come back, we'll get you to say more things. But I appreciate you hanging out with us, and you did a great job. And hopefully we'll have John back on for Thursday's episode. If not, we're trying to get a revolving door of the co-pilot chair here, just in case one of us are out. So I hope you had fun.
It was fun.
And we appreciate having you, and hopefully we can have you again. Until next time, that's it for today. Thanks again for listening to the Working Class Podcast, the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. I am the blue-collar baller because John's gone, so I'm the only one today. And for Tom, the Fantasy Yoda, we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for supporting the show. Until next time.